Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The End Credits, the podcast where two brothers discuss their thoughts on a film of their choosing. I'm Dominic.
I'm Jonathan.
And today we are talking about Alfred Hitchcock's American spy thriller, North by Northwest.
I originally saw this film back in, I don't remember what year it was, but it was for a film appreciation class in college. It was like, I think this class really gave me an idea on what films are this new perspective on what films could be.
Okay.
And this was one of the films that I saw. It wasn't the film. The film that changed my perspective was Casablanca. That was the first film we did watch in that class. But I remember this one distinctively just because of how we'll probably go into it eventually too.
Right.
How James Bond-esque it felt. You know, it was essentially the first James Bond film.
It's like the precursor.
Right. And, as we go through, we'll discuss, why and how. But I have this nostalgic feeling, I guess, for it now because when I rewatched it for this podcast, it brought me back to that time of the film appreciation class and just what we talked about and how this contributed, to the film making process, in the United States at least.
Right.
And it was because I watched certain other things, it was oh, this is where it was inspired from, right? And it gave me some sort of appreciation for this because it's under the genre of a spy thriller, right? But it very much to these times, it's a comedy in my mind.
It feels more comedic.
Yeah. It has to do probably just with the content involved and the stars in it. Cary Grant, we saw him already in Philadelphia, and I'm sure we'll see more of his films later on. But man, this guy is
indestructible.
Yeah, indestructible and a comedy gold mine. His timing and stuff, and just the words he says, and just his whole persona. He has the timing right.
Right. And I've also seen this film before, and I also saw it in, I believe it was a film appreciation class. It was similar to yours. I don't know if maybe it might have been the same one or I saw it earlier. I can't remember if it was high school or if it was in college, but I had seen the film prior to watching it for the podcast, and seeing it again, I did forget quite a bit of scenes, but for the most part, I think I did remember the story and where it goes.
The American spy thriller film North by Northwest was directed by Alfred Hitchcock with a release date of July 1st, 1959. It had a runtime of 136 minutes, and it stars Cary Grant, Eva Marie Saint, and James Mason. A New York City advertising executive goes on the run after being mistaken for a government agent by a group of foreign spies.
I think it is an interesting story, and I feel like Cary Grant certainly plays the part. And I love how you said that his comedic timing was just perfect. And I completely agree. I feel like I almost didn't catch that the first time watching it. From what I remembered, I thought it was a lot more serious. And I mean, I will say that in certain parts it was, but I think just with the delivery from Cary Grant within his lines and also in his demeanor, he came off as very comedic. And I almost even glanced over the fact that he's this New York advertising executive, and I didn't even know who he really was the first time around.
Yeah, I wouldn't say maybe it wasn't actually supposed to be there at first, but I think obviously throughout the time, obviously it's supposed to be this fun comedic side of just everything in this world, and he has this timing that's I feel unmatched in a sense, and also like going back to this whole James Bond-esque style, I think they even copied some of that stuff to add to that sort of series, that whole like persona, if you will. And yeah, he just plays this like fun character that like goes through this mishap, being mistaken for George Kaplan, and he's supposed to be some other New York advertising executive, but like yeah, we don't really see that side of him throughout. He's just like thrown in like a kind of like a person just thrown into this other world and has to like deal with it. And it's just kind of funny how he deals with it, I guess.
Right. And it's also funny the fact that he even gets involved with it, because I feel like that there could have been a point where he could have just ended it all, but obviously there'd be no story.
Right.
So to see Roger Thornhill, Cary Grant's character, it was interesting to see that he actually kept continuing going into like what the story was and what it could be. And it's also unfortunate how he got mixed up in it all, because it was just a simple phone call that he was going to have, and he was at the wrong place, wrong time.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like it's more again going back to the fact it's supposed to be like a fun comedic style, I think, because like if we do think about it logically, there would be like holes to this. It's like obviously there's the timing issue, like he put his name up first because he just wanted to make a phone call. If that never happened, he would have never had this whole story, right?
Right.
And if the bad guys, they were supposed to actually figure out that he was who he said he was, then this would have never happened either. So like we have to give some sort of leeway for this like story to even happen. But like I don't know, I guess if you go along with the ride in the beginning, then it becomes like a little easier to say, okay, here's where we're going now and stuff like that. I do want to say though, like in the beginning, it's kind of like we're not really meant, I guess, to like even understand, that side of Thornhill, because it's like I don't know if it was the audio just mixed weirdly in this film or it was intentional, but it was super low at the beginning, especially like with dialogue, right? You couldn't really understand what they were going for or what they were saying. And I think that could be like an intentional piece where it's like, okay, this stuff doesn't really matter. Just know he's some, New York executive, and here's where we're going to place him later, right? So like this stuff doesn't really matter. It's just here we are now. He gets mixed up and he seems confused, and I think the audience can grasp that idea of like being kidnapped and sent somewhere else and not knowing what's really going on.
I caught on to that too, and I think it could have been intentional, but it also could have been maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just a matter of the dialogue was just buried in the mix.
That's true.
But I think if we were to play it intentionally, I think it makes sense and it works, because like you're saying, we don't need to really understand. The most we really need to know is that he's this big time executive, and the nitty gritty details don't really matter. So it almost works to that effect if that's what they were going for. And it seems like they were, because eventually we never really get to know that persona, like you're saying.
Right. Because like again, it doesn't really matter that sort of side of him. It's just like, okay, where we're going and who he's going to become, I guess, because that side really matters in the story. And he's mistaken for this. Well, we don't really know at first, like as the audience, they just keep calling him George Kaplan, and we're like, who's this guy? And so is he's, like, oh no, I'm Roger Thornhill, I'm somebody else. And these bad guys are like either the worst bad guys ever or like the perfect timing, just caught them up or whatever. But yeah, they just don't buy it. And it's kind of like funny just to see here, just because, they just don't see it any other way, or don't even like think about like, oh, maybe this is the wrong guy, because they're so caught up in their whole situation that they're like, oh yeah, we found you, and we're basically going to
kidnap you at this point.
Yeah.
Well, to their credit though, they'd never seen Kaplan
right
prior to this. So, and the fact that they heard all of the details with, Cary Grant was trying to get some waiter to get his attention, and then the name Kaplan just came, and then he stood up and rose. So I don't blame the villains for assuming that is Kaplan, because everything added up as such, and they would obviously, and as we see actually like in the film, Roger Thornhill, Cary Grant's character, is trying to explain himself and say, I'm Roger Thornhill. I don't know who you people are. Who is George Kaplan? I don't know who these people are. And the bad guys are obviously, they are right in the sense to not believe Thornhill, because they expect to believe that, they have every reason to believe that Kaplan, or Thornhill in this case, is a spy. Is a spy.
And he wouldn't give his whole identity up easily.
Correct.
Either. So it makes sense to like that degree, but like I guess you would hope to think that they would double check on everything just to make sure that everything's correct or whatnot. But they're so just caught up in their own world that it doesn't really matter in that sense.
And and that's why I'm saying, like, why would they, especially when they had that evidence to suggest that is Kaplan, like in the very beginning. So I can understand, but I in that regard, I almost feel like they would have no need to double check.
I would say though, like, what do you think about just Cary Grant or Roger Thornhill or George Kaplan,
right,
whatever you want to call him? What do you think about him being like very like at ease in some sense? Like, he was kidnapped by these guys, but yet he's still playing jokes and still think he can get out of the situation, and like kind of like he doesn't really seem like he's in a position that he's about to be like in some sort of threat or something like that, right? Or taken out in that sense, until like later on, obviously. But like at the beginning, he's very like, okay, we can fix this sort of situation. Like, it's just a misunderstanding, not really believing the extent on like where he is right now. So what do you think about that?
I think it works, especially like with Cary Grant, because I think he's able to easily play up this person who's completely carefree and, like you're saying, doesn't exactly understand the extent of the situation. So I think it makes it a little bit more playful and joyful, especially for the audience to watch. And it's part of Cary Grant's charm, I think, and in the characters in which he plays. So I think it works really well. And it almost works even better once he starts to realize the extent of the situation. Yeah. And now he's like, what have I got myself into, really? And now I actually do want to get out of it, because you do see him start to get a little bit upset because, he has something as like little as some theater tickets and he can't be late to that show, and things like that. Right. I liked it. I mean, I think that Cary Grant pulls it off. So
yeah. And this is supposed to like eventually lead to like the next sorts of scenes where I want to say like some semi-iconic and semi like comedic, where he's gets drugged, or like as he says, like, they dumped a bottle of bourbon in me, like with all the alcohol and stuff like that, and he's completely out. He's out for the counts, and they put him on this. Well, we don't know it's stolen, but it's supposed to be a stolen car out to the seaside, and gonna go off to a cliff, basically into the water and dead. But he wakes up and like basically takes over the car and drives off into this like wild chase. Well, like, what do you think about this chase? And I want to say like it's another funny comedic moment, because like, come on, how would he do this? And maybe it's also just the times, with the green screen, it just doesn't look obviously like as real or like as intense as it's supposed to be. Yeah, it just makes it like, with their facial expressions, like, oh man, he's really trying to play a drunk guy at this point, like, and hallucinate and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that I think this scene is probably just a product of the times, because I don't think it's supposed to be comedic. I don't think so. I think we're supposed to take it as a suspenseful moment where, Cary Grant's character is driving drunk, and it's obviously really bad for him at this point because he could crash at any moment. And I think obviously, yes, the green screen is pretty poor, but I think it's the best they could have done at this time. For 59, it's, it's what you would expect, I think. And yeah, I think we're supposed to. This scene is probably supposed to play more into the suspense, and it's kind of hard to see it that way because of the green screen and the over the top reactions and the over the top reacting to what they're seeing. And yeah, it's I think it's like probably not the greatest scene of the film, and to be honest, I think it's funny, but I just feel like more than likely we're not supposed to take it that way.
I actually think that I kind of wonder why they even green screened it. Do you think it's all just because of the nighttime? You think? Because
Probably.
Vertigo came out a year before this, and they had like a car scene which we won't go into, right?
Yeah.
But I would argue that their whole car scene is actually a lot more suspenseful than this. So actually, I'm thinking now that like this is meant to be comedic or over the top because Alfred Hitchcock was able to do another car scene and make it like suspenseful
and more believable.
More believable, yeah. But it could also be just the time of days because I believe in Vertigo's it was a morning and afternoon type of situation, where in this one it is later at night. But there are some like night scenes later on in North by Northwest, but I guess they are like stationary. They're not,
for the most part.
Yeah, involving cars. So maybe it could be a case of that, or like maybe the location didn't lend itself to like, okay, we're still in the same area, right?
Perhaps.
Believability.
Yeah.
So like maybe you could take into account those situations, but yeah, I'm like maybe in the camp of like it was actually meant to be over the top and over like again leaning to that comedic side and playful side of this is what we're leaning into,
Interesting. Yeah, I could definitely see it as a comedic scene. I guess I'm just not sure if it's supposed to play off that way. Maybe so, especially with the fact that Cary Grant is drunk and he's just trying to escape and run for his life, or drive away and maybe take his own life in the process. And that was the point. That was the point of that whole scene. But I could see it as a comedic one. It could have been intentional. I actually really do like the moments when we as an audience saw everything beforehand, seeing how Roger Thornhill was, brought into this room. He met Lester Townsend, or who we think is supposed to be Lester Townsend, and we have that whole interaction, right? And that when he has to come back and like explain his position, this was obviously a comedic like moment where he was just trying to defend himself in the fact that, they carry their bourbon here, and this is where they drugged me, and all these other things, and he can't even fight against it because they clearly hid their tracks.
Right. Because like, at this point, like he's basically eventually taken by the cops, and he's just so drunk and disoriented that they don't believe a thing he says. And he tries to like prove his innocence by going back to the house that he was kidnapped in, and like everything's gone. Everything that he described happened. It's like doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And it's kind of weird because like I'm thinking like in my mind, how do they even pull it off? Like we do hear like later that they could possibly have been the gardener and the people taking care of the house, but like. Maybe it's again another thing of the time where people just didn't really know, other people, or didn't have the awareness as we do, like technology, with social media and everything like that, to like double check, quote unquote, on those sorts of things. Because like, they met the wife and the housekeeper and all that stuff, and like everybody seemed to buy that these were the people that lived there. And what else would you think, because they opened the door and they came by with the name and stuff,
right?
But like it was too far. Also with Roger Thornhill just being drunk and disoriented, he was just so uncredible at this moment, so that they just assumed that everybody else was telling the truth. So like, yeah, but like also in the other way, it's like, man, how do they pull this off, and how are they able to, you know, nobody questioned anything, you know?
Right. And I do want to skip ahead a little bit. I think, you know, pretty soon, it gets to the point where Roger Thornhill is kind of having like this vendetta, and now he just wants to figure out, well, who is George Kaplan, and how can I get to him, and how can we sort this business, because he wants to get to the bottom of it. And that's like kind of interesting how like the story turns into that now Roger has to go and find Kaplan, and he needs to like, you know, talk to him and say like, you know, you did this to me, you did this to my life, and now you got to pay for it, essentially. And that's where things get pretty fun and interesting with the story, where especially like when we get to the hotel, and Thornhill is like going to Kaplan's hotel room, and I love like this kind of like what you said in the beginning. I did feel like James Bond-esque in that now Thornhill is kind of becoming like the detective, and he's trying to just put the pieces together. And he's learning and realizing that looks like no one even knows who Kaplan is or what he looks like. And that's like an interesting thing in the very beginning of the film.
Yeah, I would say like it adds like an intrigue that, you know, us as the audience are also like, okay, who is this person he's being mistaken for, and how are we going to find him? It adds, you know, mystery aspect to like, okay, we're hooked now to watch this film because we want to also figure out what's happening here, right?
Right. And who's Kaplan and what's his story.
And also with the fact that there's these men chasing him that we don't know who they are and, you know, what they are doing. And that like adds this whole suspense, you know, obviously, you know, when he tries to escape from them too and tries to track down all the pieces and stuff like that. And it starts to like hook you in and want you to figure out like who's this Kaplan character. I would say like here's like an iconic scene too, you know, when they're at the United Nations building. They have to go find who's who and everything like that.
Right.
Well, it's interesting bit because I believe I read this somewhere where they didn't have rights to, or like I think anybody at the time really you couldn't actually film by the actual building at that time.
Yeah.
So they had to like screw the rules sorts of situation where, you know, he went aside and still filmed from afar to get these sort of shots, like all the insides,
the exteriors.
Yeah, all the exteriors, all the interior stuff was, you know, somewhere else, obviously, right? But this exterior shot where they drop them off from the cab, like these are like hidden cameras from afar, you know?
Yeah, because they filmed across the street, didn't they?
Yeah. Just because, you know, like nobody could at that time.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I remember reading into that, and I thought that was like, oh, that's interesting. And talking about the interior shots, they had some really great, I don't know what you would call them, like, oh man, I totally remember the name and I'm blanking. But there's like
the matte paintings.
Yeah, the matte paintings. That's what I'm referring to. They had some really great matte paintings for the interior shots for the United Nations. Really great, like tall ceilings. We could see the detail, especially like when he's leaving. We see this really great like bird's eye view shots where he's running out, and it just looks so like, obviously we can tell that it's a painting,
Right.
I think the colors really gave it away. I think if the colors were a little bit more muted, I think it could have pulled it off a little bit better. But it's really good, and I'm like really interested by how they could utilize these, and I'm sure they were probably a little bit like, if only we could actually have the real thing, obviously. But you know, I'm sure they had to do the best they could, and it looked great for what it had to be.
Yeah, I think it was like visually striking, you know?
Yeah.
Because it had these elements of like symmetry, and, you know, you had this
and
balance.
depth.
Yeah, depth and stuff like that. And also just with these actual people, you know, actually walking through, you know, the map painting. It looked fine for what the story was trying to tell.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the big thing here in the United Nations building is him getting caught in another trap thing.
Oh yeah, that was awful.
And he meets the congressman. I believe it's congressman or United Nation man, businessman. I don't know what his name was.
I'm not sure.
The real was his Lester Townsend. He meets him, and it's not the same guy he met previously,
right? Who claimed it was Lester Townsend.
Yeah, and now he's like sort of confused and like, this is not the guy I met. Trying to piece together these sorts of things, and us as audience again, we're along for the ride, and eventually one of the guys trailing him throws a knife and kills the actual guy, and now everybody thinks Cary Grant's character actually killed him. It starts this whole thing like, no, it wasn't me. And
right.
Cary Grant again having this like, why did he touch the knife? Why did he stare there too long?
And he got his photo taken.
Yeah. And it's like, it just adds another like comedic element, I would say, just because it's like he obviously, I think he made himself look worse by his actions.
Yeah.
But obviously, maybe people would act that way in that sort of situation. But it just added a little bit more like hilariousness to, oh man, here we go again.
Yeah, exactly. I think he dug a larger hole for himself, and now he's just like in it, and now he has to go on the run. And now we like get to even more iconic scenes where he has his classic disguise with his awesome shades. And I have to say like that his whole like his suit and his glasses have become like a staple in fashion. And you can actually like purchase that whole like getup.
Yeah, the glasses, the suit, and everything. Because like you said,
it's such an iconic look.
Yeah. That it's even like that gray suit's like iconic. It inspired other sorts of fashion sense and everything like that.
Right.
I would say that like we're in New York because obviously he's a New York advertising executive.
Yeah.
And this train station is like an iconic train station, I believe, because I've seen this in many different films and many different areas. And a lot of these actually places in this film you can actually go to. I believe before we did this podcast, I did some research on Wikipedia, and they actually have a whole list on Wikipedia. They have the like exact locations pinpointed like on a map to like where these places are supposed to be. Like eventually we go to Mount Rushmore and stuff like that, but you can actually go to a lot of these places that were featured in the film. And actually like stand there, it's like, oh yeah, this is in this place, And Wikipedia actually has the locations up, so you can actually pinpoint like on a Google map or something like that.
Interesting.
Where these places are. But
I was gonna say I felt like that most of the film was shot on locations, except for maybe like some of the more high action scenes. But I did notice that I felt like a lot of the time we were in real locations, and it didn't seem like it was a set.
Yeah, because like so I read too that apparently in the original like script it wasn't like for the movie, right? It's like the original idea was intended to be like a traveling salesman sorts of guy to go to the, I believe, Middle East, and then eventually get caught by these people, but you said he was somebody else, right? This sort of agent scenario, right?
So another mistaken identity story.
Right.
Okay.
And this person was supposed to travel to location to location to location. And that's where like this whole basis of this movie, where we go to a lot of places. What I believe Alfred Hitchcock wanted to go to Mount Rushmore because I believe he wanted to use that location in some capacity. And, eventually this script came and he was able to do that sort of scenario. And that's why we get like a lot of these like places where you could probably go to, because we go to New York, Chicago, South Dakota, and stuff like that. Indiana, and it's stuff like these places where they're real places, right?
Yeah.
The United Nations building, just for example, these places you can go, and that's why they had these whole sorts of scenarios where we saw these live locations. I will say that it was interesting bits was that the original traveling salesman character was actually kind of like best suited, best well written for Jimmy Stewart's character.
Oh, really?
But yeah, it's for this film, they changed it to like this New York executive, because they needed it to fit more with Cary Grant. So
Interesting.
just for the character basis and what audience knew at that time associated with the character, it made more sense for Cary Grant to be this sort of character, while like a Jimmy Stewart character would be this traveling salesman, this everyday, guy, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little interesting bit, because we just watched Philadelphia Story earlier too, so it's like seeing this connection again is kind of like interesting,
Right, and along with Rope, and I think that's it, and another Hitchcock film. So it would have been interesting to see him in yet another one. Just imagine Jimmy Stewart in North by Northwest instead of Cary Grant. Wow,
Right.
what could have been?
right?
Wow, interesting. I will say though, like I feel like getting back to the film with Cary Grant, I feel like he works really well with Eva Marie Saint as she plays Eve Kendall, I believe her name is.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think that's another interesting, intriguing bit to the story as well. And I think I remember when I watched it for the first time, there's, as you know, like in film, there's always this femme fatale. There's always that kind of character who comes in and in some way distracts the main character from their ultimate plan, or I guess getting further in the story, and that could be quite literal. And when she gets introduced into the film, it's kind of like, okay, she helps him for a second because Thornhill needs to escape from the cops who are now chasing him because he's wanted for murder, or the murder that he didn't actually commit. And she actually helps him for a quick minute, and he takes notice of this, and it's like, oh, okay, now what? Was this just a one-off thing? And of course it's not. And it's interesting, like how like we were reintroduced to her when he's trying to get a bite to eat. And I think what I really didn't notice and pick up on the very first time I watched this was I think the dialogue is actually pretty well written, or at least I like the script, and maybe it all has to do with just delivery from the actors themselves. But I did really like this conversation between the two of them, where they were kind of like, it also felt similar to the fencing that we saw in Rope between Brandon and Rupert. But this is a little bit different in that this is Thornhill and Kendall, obviously like flirting, but also this element of like Kendall already knows who Thornhill is and he's trying to hide it. And that's great. Right. I love that. I love that there's this moment of comedy, seriousness, and playfulness all in the same scene.
Yeah, that's true. I would say that a lot of it has to do with the delivery of the lines, because without that, I think it could have been maybe a little like on the nose, too cheesy, maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe at some areas you could say it did do that, but like again, I think it just fit with the atmosphere of the movie that was already being playing, the Cary Grant as we know him already with just his whole suave and persona.
Yeah.
I think it added this whole effect that just like that dialogue sequence in Rope, it kind of like felt like this back to back where, okay, who's gonna say something first, I guess.
Exactly. And who's gonna let on.
Yeah.
And I thought it was absolutely hilarious, and we talked about it too when it happened, when Eve is like telling her or telling Carrie like about her, and then Cary Grant just like replies with some like fake name.
And
says
fake alias.
Yeah, like this fake alias and fake job, and it's like, why? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, just like I said when we watched it, I think the fact that made it funnier is that he had this fake persona just out of his pocket, basically. Yeah, like immediately it's like he had this other persona, of George Kaplan. Of George Kaplan already. So we just had we know him as Cary Grant. We know him as Roger Thornhill. we now know him as George Kaplan. And then he just pulls out some other random name.
Yeah.
It's like, what? A fourth, well, who is this guy?
Right.
Sorts of thing. But,
Right. Like, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
It was pretty funny. And I think it worked for the scene. And so then now we have Eve Kendall in the mix, but we don't really know. See, at this point, we're kind of like, okay, is she just this random person? And that's all we know at this point. And I was like, I think they pulled this off really well, because if you're watching the film for the first time, that's really all you think, or at least I did the first time watching. And then like we get that scene where we realize who Eve actually is, and she's working for the bad guys,
Right.
And we're like, oh man, okay. And you don't even like, I feel like nowhere do we actually get the sense that she's working for them. And then once we get hit by it, it's like, oh man, Alfred Hitchcock creates the suspense yet again. And now he gives us this bit of information that the audience only knows. And now Cary Grant's character, Thornhill, doesn't.
It's also like a really great, because of the fact that we're like establishing this like playful relationship. So we're kind of like letting our guard down, very calm, just like he is. And then we see this whole moment of like passing the notes that, oh man, this strikes us that he's actually in danger. He doesn't know it. We know it. And, we're back again in that like suspenseful field, and like, we got to be on our guard again, and stuff like that. And just a powerful moment, I guess. Yeah.
I noticed that like the more Hitchcock films that we watch, I notice that he does that a lot. He'll give the audience something in return for making the main character feel like that they don't, or they actually not feel like they don't know the information yet. Mm-hmm. So it's like we're playing catch up, and I think it's very effective. He usually does it, and I think in this film especially, it was effective because we want Thornhill to realize that he's in danger. And we even get that moment where Kendall is, where we can kind of see that she's a little bit guilty by the fact that she's doing this to him. I think even the first time I watched it, it did feel clear, and it felt even clearer the second time around, obviously. And you could tell that there's this, especially like when he's trying to escape and they leave the train, they're in the train station, and now he's going to go on his own way. They're going to go the separate ways. And at this point, Kendall like just kind of wants him to go. And he obviously wants, like, oh, when am I going to see you again? Mm-hmm. That sort of thing. And it kind of turns into like, oh, there's nothing left to be said here. You have to go now. And I always thought that was kind of like interesting, because we're seeing something else now from Kendall, because before she was this smooth character, seemed like nothing bothered her. She was in control. And now all of a sudden we're seeing something else come through.
Yeah, I would say that like what's also like unique about that too is that it kind of also keeps up the appearance that yes, she's guilty, but we don't know why yet. And
exactly.
We don't know like, because obviously we do, later find out what side she plays. But right now at this moment, maybe she's just guilty because she is sending him off to, and that's it.
Right.
We don't know the full picture yet. But I do want to actually like back up just a tiny bit where they had this comedic moment where it's like, we had to talk about it, I feel like, where basically, they escape the train, right? And he goes to the restroom to go change and shave or whatnot, right? And we had this cool, like, clear, like, and again, a James Bond moment where he gets away, with it just because he has a shaving cream on him. So the police doesn't recognize him when they enter the restroom.
Right.
So he gets away, and it's like, oh, that's a cool moment, cool, everything like that, right?
Yeah.
All those vibes. But then, he pulls out this like mini razor, I guess, and just a shave. And again, probably only Cary Grant could pull this off, because, it was so just hilarious, because that guy next to him, he had this full grown actual razor blade, while this, he's had this little, I don't know what you want to call it.
Yeah.
This like little shaving thing. And, He didn't have to say a word in this moment, and we just everybody knew what was happening.
Yeah.
It was hilarious.
Yeah, I think it was an effective moment, and like you're saying, no words even had to be said, and it was funny. It was a good moment, especially like when, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again: the fact that in any kind of film, and especially like with suspense or anything, it's always good to break the suspense every now and then because we can't keep the audience like that for a terribly long time. So the fact that we have this moment, this moment of rest, it was good.
I would say though, I think the fact that it does that is because they get used to these suspenseful moments. Like if you're always on guard, nothing's gonna catch you off guard, right?
Right.
So if we calm you down, change your emotion, then we can go back to getting you off guard and
Right.
back in the suspenseful feel, and you're not used to it again. Let's go now to the most iconic scene, I think, in this entire film with the crop duster plane. And again, iconic. You see it probably in the covers and all that stuff, trailers probably.
Promotional art.
Promotional art. This is probably the scene that North by Northwest is probably most known for, where, so basically Cary Grant, Roger Thornhill, George Kaplan, we don't know at this point, he gets sent out in the middle of nowhere. Okay, he's off in some place in Indiana, I guess,
Some cornfield.
Some random cornfield, and he's waiting there because Eva Marie's character said to go there because George Kaplan's going to meet you there.
Yeah,
and he's waiting there, just by the bus stop, and nothing's happening. He just looks, left and right, cars passing by, but nothing's happening. And here's like another kind of maybe, I don't know if unsettling, maybe like a suspenseful moment, maybe, because like there's really no music here.
No,
it's just like it's nothingness. And another car comes up by, a guy gets out, waits at the bus stop, and it's just kind of funny just to see two guys on the opposite side of the street staring at each other and not saying a word.
Yeah.
They're like, Cary Grant's like, who's this guy? Is this George Kaplan? Should I go up there and talk to him or something like that? Or, what should I do? And then eventually, he gets,
the courage.
To like, okay, I'm going to go over there. I tries to talk to him, are you George Kaplan? Nope, It's like, oh, okay.
Like, oh.
It's like, I can't say my name is, stuff like that. And, now we're kind of like, okay, what's happening here? And then we saw some other shots, in the distance, of this plane, this crop duster going about, but we never really really focus on it until the guy makes one remark, and he's like, you think it's kind of weird that crop duster plane is going over the area with no crops, and
right.
And nobody else, certainly not me, I didn't pay attention enough to realize that was happening,
Yeah.
He's just a plane in the sky, who cares? But, yeah, now at this point, the audience and even Cary Grant are like wondering, like, okay, yeah, that is kind of weird,
Yeah.
And, then, we're just all focusing, and now we just hear that plane, in the sky coming ever so closer. And then it just comes and comes and comes and all the way to like, oh, whoa, you're a little low, man.
Yeah,
What's happening? What's happening here? And then it just comes by him and he just ducks, like just like anybody would, because this is crazy. This plane's not supposed to be this low. And, now we're getting the fact that, it's trying to attack him.
Right.
We have this whole chase scene and everything like that, and him going down and stuff like that. But yeah. Just again, at this moment in time, are these scenes like even possible? So like that's what we really gotta give it some sort of props to.
Yeah, I was gonna say like now that I'm thinking about it and how like we were talking about previously with that car chase in the beginning at night when he was drunk, and now we're looking at scenes right now with the crop duster. these scenes, this chase looked really good. Like it looked really good, and I think there was only probably like one moment where I think that crop duster plane was actually flying towards him, and it's that really classic shot where he's running away from it,
Right.
and it looks like they clearly actually did shoot that, and
Yeah, I don't know.
all the other shots looks like they were pieced together, but it still looked really good. And obviously, as we know, or maybe you don't know, this scene inspired the classic helicopter chase scene in From Russia with Love from 1963, a James Bond film. And I remember for like the longest time, because I'm a pretty big James Bond fan, and I remember I love From Russia with Love, and I always remember that scene. And I remember watching North by Northwest for the first time and thinking, oh man, they copied From Russia with Love. And only to learn that, no, From Russia with Love took it from North by Northwest.
Right.
And I was like, oh, interesting. And I never even knew. I never knew. And I was like, what an iconic scene, and very well done. Very well done. And I think even like towards the end, it gets even funnier because the plane ends up crashing into this semi truck and it catches fire. And Cary Grant just ends up stealing some car and just leaves. And obviously, like when he's escaping from this fire, it's like like we even mentioned, it's like the slowest walk ever to get away from such a big disastrous fire.
Yeah, because like nowadays, when those moments happen where the whoever it is, are running away from the fire, we see this like slow motion, and then once the impact hits, they get like thrown, a few meters, away from it. But in this one, he's just like, oh no, it's just right there, and it's the slowest walk, and it's like he doesn't even care, because obviously it's just a green screen behind him, right?
Yeah.
But he's not selling it like it's anything, and it's just another hilarious moment just because of the action that's happening, and it just adds to this whole like I guess drama comedic style of the film.
Yeah. So then we end up reuniting with Eve Kendall, and now we're starting to learn a little bit more about her. And obviously she knew what was going to happen as we learn in that scene, and obviously Thornhill's pretty upset because you basically sent me to die, and like, oh, look at me now, I'm right here. I'm right here in your hotel room. And it does definitely come to a shock for her. And now we're basically learning a little bit more about her, and now it's like she clearly doesn't want him to be there, but now Cary Grant knows that maybe she's like somehow involved with Kaplan or someone else, so he needs to get to the bottom of it yet again. And he eventually does find the fake Lester Townsend, also known as Van Damme, and his right hand man, whatever his name was.
Yeah, I don't even know.
I can't remember his name. And it's like this, like, oh man, it is a pretty intense and bold move because he ends up just like walking over to them at this auction, and he just kind of puts himself in this position where like, I'm gonna make myself known. And even to Van Damme's surprise, like he's like, oh man, what is he doing here?
Right.
And it's like, is he seriously like interrupting us during this time? And it was a pretty intense move and suspenseful scene.
I would actually say this is my least favorite scene in
Oh,
the
really?
film. Yeah. Just the fact that, just right here, everything after was kind of funny, and we'll get to that, right? But right here where he just comes up out of nowhere and just meets them at this auction, I feel as if it was a little bit like not as impactful as I wanted it to be. Maybe because again, at this point, I'm like associating it with like a James Bond film where like everything's over the top, right?
Oh,
And like this reveal of like here's the bad guy, here's our main good guy, I guess, but we don't really know what he's doing. He's just in this whole situation. I feel as if we should have had some sort of like I don't know, some sort of like epic clash, maybe.
I almost consider it to be that because, and what made it even more special is the fact that they couldn't really do anything because they were around the public.
Okay, I could see that. I could see that sort of scenario.
Yeah. So the fact that they couldn't actually like do anything or really like, speak about like the situation at hand, all they could really do is just like be a part of the auction.
Do you think though that they could have been a little bit more like shown some sort of like more shock to the whole scenario? That like maybe in the whole acting they seemed a little bit too calm. That I was like, oh, he's alive, okay, but they don't like, like their eyes popping out of their head sort of scenario. Like how is this guy here? They weren't really like amazed until. They weren't ever, I guess. It's like, okay, that's kind of weird. It's almost as if they knew he was alive again.
Interesting. I actually kind of got the feeling that they were more surprised.
Oh, okay.
Than not, and that's how I interpreted it. Like right as he walks up to them, I personally felt like that they were pretty shocked by the fact that he's actually standing here.
I think maybe it has to do with like. The camera choices at that point, like maybe something of like a close up to their face could have like intensified that whole scenario to make me really feel that impact. But I guess because Alfred Hitchcock didn't choose that, it was lessened in my mind. Maybe I don't know.
Interesting. Pretty soon after, finally, like we get to this point where Thornhill finally gets to understand the situation a little bit more because he finally gets to meet one of the detectives who's behind this entire operation, as we come to learn. I think we actually learn it like probably a few scenes before where we actually get introduced to the whole idea and the plan that there is no George Kaplan. He doesn't actually exist. But now since Thornhill kind of inserted himself in that position, he has to continue to be. And we also know that there's some other agent, but we don't actually know who the agent is at this point. But we do learn that it happens to be Kendall. And now Cary Grant realizes this, and because he doesn't even want to continue being Kaplan and everything, and he complains to the detective and, like, why am I doing this? You know how much trouble this has caused me. And once he realizes the stakes that Eve may be in danger, now he has to go save her.
Yeah, and then they like eventually, go to South Dakota, and they have this whole like, here's another like weird scenario to me where it doesn't really make sense. Where he meets Van Damme there. They have some sort of like conversation on, how he can escape without the actual like FBI, CIA, whoever knowing. And then, Eve shoots him.
Yeah, I thought this was weird too. Like, I understand, but like there was never a point where they were ever going to negotiate.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, why is there a negotiation taking place? And I guess I understand because now since Thornhill is committed to the Kaplan role, he has to play the part and pretend like, oh, yeah, I'm part of the FBI or CIA, whatever. And I know your plans and I know your rendezvous and I know where you're going to be. And I know when you're going to leave tomorrow night. And so it was this moment of, okay, I have to scare you with this knowledge that I have. And even though technically I'm not even sure they actually did have that knowledge, but, and they had to rescue Kendall.
It just doesn't make sense, though, as like, I feel like in the bad guy's perspective, only because it's like, okay, already know that you had this information through our previous, meeting, and then he gets captured by the cops, which I assume Van Damme understands that they're on the same side and stuff like that, and then he just comes back to have this meeting with him already. So like, obviously, if you know the information, you already told somebody else. So why would I even had this whole deal situation even happen? And
Right.
it's just all kind of weird. And then, Kendall shoots him. So, like, what is he supposed to think of this scenario? Like, okay, the cops already figured it out because this guy already knows because I saw him getting taken away from those cops.
Right.
Kendall shoots him. So now they're probably suspicious of her. I know I have to leave, but I also know that the cops know how I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
So how am I supposed to get out of the situation by I can't leave the way I was supposed to leave, right?
Yeah. You right.
So like I don't know that this whole scene didn't make sense to me because of just certain logic scenarios, but like I don't know what you're supposed to say. I guess
Yeah, it was a little strange, but we do see, which is kind of like interesting, and maybe this is what Hitchcock just wanted everyone to focus on, is the fact that like once Kendall actually does go back to Van Damme's place, he clearly basically believed the whole situation that Kaplan was shot and Kendall did it, and Kendall's going to go with Van Damme out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's kind of weird. Like, so he was fooled by it, and he clearly looks like he was, but obviously the bodyguard of Van Damme wasn't. He wasn't buying it. Like, he knew that something was wrong, and specifically with Eve.
Right. It's like I don't know. Like that's why this thing doesn't make sense. But like I guess we'll just clear stuff up later. Whatever.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Kendall shoots Cary Grant or George Kaplan, Roger Thornhill, whatever.
Yeah.
And she leaves. Everybody leaves, and now the FBI and we already knew this. The FBI and Roger Thornhill are working together. They go meet with Eve Kendall. Eventually, they talk about have their apologies to each other, and now she's gonna go leave with Van Damme to go out of the country, and basically Roger Thornhill's mad about this, and eventually they're trying to keep him away from Kendall in order so that the operation can continue.
Yeah.
They have this whole like I guess fight about what's right and wrong, because the main character has to stand up for good and stuff while whatever situation. And eventually this leads us to like the end sequence where it's nighttime, and eventually Cary Grant, smooth move guy, is able to get out of the FBI somehow, right?
Yeah.
Because he's James Bond, I guess.
Yeah, he goes like full James Bond mode at this point.
Right, because he escapes the FBI to go hopefully rescue Eve Kendall. And I would say at this moment, once he goes to Van Damme's place, that this is where I feel like it really like has this like sort of a pickup moment. Maybe even like I always tend to forget what's gonna happen here. Like, because when I remembered every other situation ahead of this going into North by Northwest.
Yeah.
But always at this moment, I feel like I always get caught off guard. And I actually think it's a somewhat good thing because of the events that happen here. But like, I want to know if like, did you remember anything going in? What was your thoughts, when he was creeping towards this building? And did you think he was, gonna make it somehow?
Yeah. I think I forgot certain parts. Like, for example, I kind of forgot about like him listening in on the conversation between Van Damme and his bodyguard, and I completely forgot that the bodyguard was like, for a second, I thought he was going to turn on him, and I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, let's talk about this scene right now, because this scene is actually really good.
Yeah,
and this is why I'm like, okay, it's really great that I did forget because of this whole situation. Because, they have a conversation.
Right.
And like you said before, the right hand man is like suspicious of Eve Kendall, and now I don't know, for some reason Van Damme was like, oblivious to everything,
Seems like it.
and we just see the right hand man grab the gun, has a gun in the back, and I was like, whoa, what's happening here, right? Is he gonna shoot him or whatnot? And then eventually he does. We hear the shots, the camera angle goes to him like in this evil look, right? That he's like, oh yeah, this is it. And Van Damme has this like shocked expression on his face, and we're like, whoa, what happened?
Yeah, did he just shoot him?
Yeah, did he just shoot him? Where are we going now? I was like, why and then how, and all that situation's running through our head, and we're expecting him to fall dead, right?
Yeah.
But then nothing happens. It's like, I don't know, this is the same gun that I stole from her luggage that she shot Cary Grant or George Kaplan, and then he has this whole like, he punches them, which the punch looked bad in my opinion, just because obviously they had to fake it. I don't know why they obviously had to fake it,
That was a little weird.
Either way, they faked it, and it was a little weird, but it was like a really cool moment, because it's like, oh man, did he just shoot him, and where they could have went with the story right there.
Yeah. I think it was like, even though I've watched this film already, like it was so unexpected, like you said.
Yeah.
And I think it's special, like when those moments can't happen, because now you are kind of lost in the scene, not lost in the bad way. I mean, like lost inside of it. And that's what's great. And I think a lot has to do with just, what's taking place. And I think that feeling of Cary Grant going into full James Bond mode is kind of like, it's like an intriguing piece, because they don't know that he's there, and the audience is there with him. So it's like a nice thing to watch, because obviously we don't want him to get caught, but we want him to be able to alert Eve Kendall because he's there, and we want Eve to escape. So we're feeling that within us. So it's like the pressure's on.
Also, with the fact that we eventually know, because when Cary Grant was first shot, we didn't know it was a fake gun, right? Until eventually later, they revealed it to us.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the trick worked twice, in some
Three
scenario.
times probably.
Oh, yeah, three times.
Three times.
You're right. Somehow the same trick worked 3 times in this movie, where, they had the gun, or a gun, because we didn't know it was the same gun by that time. And we were fooled by it somehow, just because, like, maybe it's because of the fact that it was a gun, right? And we just know that once someone has it on somebody, they gotta, tread lightly, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. So for some reason, that same gun trick works 3 times throughout this movie. And at this point now, Cary Grant's trying to grab the attention of Eve, and basically is a little too late by that time.
Yeah.
But he knows that they're onto her, right?
Right. Didn't you think it was a nice touch that he used his matches?
Yeah. So good. Because again, it goes back to the scenario when they first met,
at the dinner table.
Right. Because she brought up this whole thing, like, what's rot? Because this is the matches that he had to light a cigarette or whatever. And he says, oh, that's just my trademark or whatnot. And she asks, what O means. And he's like, oh, no, nothing. But
it's his initials.
Right. Not the O, though. The R and the T is, but O doesn't. But either way, right? It was so out of place at that moment that we were forced to, like, notice it was there, because it's like, okay, why was this there? Who chooses rot as their trademark and whatnot? It was just so out of left field, right? So we remembered by this moment in time, this is why we had this sort of a moment before, long-term storytelling here. It's so easy, and it played a helpful role of communication, that even the audience, we knew what was about to happen, in this next scene where he writes a note in the match lid, and this is funny too, just lightly tossing it over to her,
and he misses.
Yeah,
he misses.
So good. But we knew the intensity here, right? Because us as audience, we know he's in the building, and we at least hope that she remembered his trademark, right? And when she does, like, her acting here is like brilliant too.
Oh yeah.
Just because of the camera shot here and everything, she's just she sees it like on the ashtray.
Yeah, and keep in mind the camera's from the back, so we
Right,
don't even
right,
see
right.
her face at all.
Right. We're from Cary Grant's point of view, which is he's like on the second floor looking down at her.
Right.
And she sees it from this angle, and she just flicks it open because she's like, "Oh, how did this get here?" Right?
Well, she first notices it in the ashtray, and she like twists her head in such oh, I recognize this.
Yeah.
It was so well done.
Yeah. She looks both ways because again, like, yeah, how is this here?
Yeah,
And, is
exactly.
he over here? And then she picks it up, looks at it, and then just it's like a quick snap. She closes it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, it's like that was the confirmation we knew or we needed as the audience to know that she knows we're all on the same page.
Yeah, it's
And
awesome.
It was just an awesome moment that the fact that just her quickness was enough communication to us to understand that. And it's like, wow, that's crazy. That's powerful. And that's what, like, I feel as if that shows good storytelling, directing, whatever you want to call it, of like Alfred Hitchcock to be able to effectively communicate that to everyone watching.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Right. And like that scene even heightens and it grows because we now, okay, so like, all right, now she knows, and then they get to like reunite once again, and now he gets to like explain it to her and like, don't go on the plane. And it gets even like more intense because now she knows, and she knows that they're onto her, and she can't get on the plane because she's gonna be tossed off, she's gonna die. And then it just like grows like so suspenseful because you don't want her to get out on the plane, but the plane's here now, and now they're going.
Yeah.
They're slowly going to board the plane, and it's like, oh man. And as Alfred Hitchcock does, it's just this suspenseful moment of slowly walking to the plane, and she's looking back at the house because she's waiting for Thornhill to come and rescue her because he said he would. And where is he? And like we said, that the gun works a third time here when the maid or the sister of Van Damme, I believe who that is. I think that's who it is. Or it's someone else. I believe it's his sister. And she notices that Thornhill's in the house, and she
Through the television screen. I mean,
Right.
come on.
Right.
Make sure you account for all the reflections,
Right, exactly. And she has him at at gunpoint, and then eventually Thornhill realizes that it's actually the blank gun. And finally, like what seems like eternity, like right as she's about to board the plane, he comes and saves her, and they drive off. And it's like this. Now we're getting into like that final chase scene at Mount Rushmore, out of all places. And again, I think like Jackie Chan and Police Story 2, this also feels like a really nice, unique location for a suspenseful / action scene. Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I would say so, because like the fact that we learn that they're on top of it and there's no way / method of escaping. They're like, okay, we just gotta climb down. It's like, seriously, I'm not gonna climb down from that height. It's like, no way, just let them take me, so whatever. But like, it's like, especially with her shoes. I mean, come on,
Oh yeah, she's wearing heels.
Yeah, how do you expect her to climb down there or whatever? But either way, they do it, and it has like this intensity because obviously, they're on a tall, monument essentially, and all these other people, these henchmen, are coming down to get them too. And we see some like angles where, oh, maybe they did take a little bump and stuff like that, and like, oh man, that's gotta hurt.
Yeah.
And for all the characters really. And this eventually goes into like a fight scenes between a bunch of them, just seeing who would live and whatever. And people fall
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And it was really intense to the point where eventually Kendall gets thrown off too, and then eventually Cary Grant, Roger Thornhill, he has to go over there and help her too. And he's like if you remember, obviously when we were watching Batman Begins, it's like the same moment where he's holding her from like one arm and he's trying to hold the monument from another arm, and he's trying to use his strength, but maybe he's not going to be enough. And then the henchman comes over, and it's just weird too because Cary Grant, Roger Thornhill says, "Help me," because I was like, "This is crazy," and then it adds some sort of intensity moments, where it's like this classic. This guy, we just see his shoe go right on top of Roger Thornhill's fingers, like he's gonna press on it because this is the end or whatever.
This is it.
Yeah, and then out of nowhere, a gunshot fires. It's like even Van Damme comments, and it's like, "Oh man, that wasn't very sportsmanlike."
Right.
It's like,
to use live bullets.
Yeah, it's like it was a funny moment right there.
I was gonna say, yeah, like every time that I watch this movie, because like, oh man, and then for whatever reason we get this shot, like, because the henchman gets shot and then he falls down, and then Cary Grant is like still has to pull up Eve. And he finally like does so, but in the moment it like switches to like back on the train, and he's pulling her up into the top bunk bed, and then it just ends. And every time that I watch this film, man, I'm always disappointed by the ending.
Yeah, I am too.
I'm always disappointed because I'm like, I feel like after all of what we've been through, it almost felt like the ending was like rushed.
Yeah. We gotta wrap it up.
Like we gotta wrap it up. We lost money. We lost time. We gotta end it.
Close it down.
Yeah, close it down. And it's like,
oh shoot!
Each time I watch the ending, I'm like, oh man, why did it end like that? And strangely enough, I almost feel like in a lot of Alfred Hitchcock films, they always feel so like slow and methodical throughout the entire film until the end. It always feels like until the end, it's like they just kind of like rush into it to the point where we can't even think about it. And maybe that's the point, because I feel like with each Hitchcock film, it always feels like that, and we don't feel this sense of like true closure.
I actually think it depends on the film, because I actually think Rope was a really good example of an ending that was really like wrapped up nicely,
and well paced.
Yeah, everything was like perfect, I think, in that Rope ending.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But when it comes to North by Northwest, yeah, I agree. It's catching me off guard every single time. It's like, what happened? Did we cut something out of the film? Where's the scene? I'm missing, essential content to make, this sentence, what happened here?
Right. Yeah. Like what happened?
But yeah. The ending, can't really explain it. But I do think that there's, if you think about it in this like comedic sense, maybe it really works. I was like, at this point, who cares? I don't know. Like you said, though, it was really an intense moment by the fact of how we got here. You kind of wanted it to like wrap up nicely.
And it doesn't.
Yeah, and it doesn't really. Just like, okay, let's end it.
Let's just end it. Right. And for like, as good as the film is, I think from like the opening, and it's a lot more, I think it's just better paced earlier on in the film and in the middle. And I think probably like in the train is probably my favorite moments. And like just by the time we get to Mount Rushmore, it's supposed to be this intense and suspenseful moment. And then it just kind of gets, abruptly cut, and it feels just out of place.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would say my favorite moments is the point when Roger Thornhill goes to Van Damme's place, and they have the whole communication with the matches, and the right hand man, quote unquote, turning on Van Damme and stuff like that. That's my favorite moments of this film. Also, with the airplane scene too, is just iconic. But like I said, I think the height of it was Van Damme's place, and again, going from there to the end, it's kind of like, it doesn't really like fulfill you in that sense.
Yeah.
But, I guess I respect it for like some elements that were, inspired from, like we said, from Russia with Love and other stuff, from his suits.
Oh yeah,
and,
definitely.
Even like the music's pretty good too.
I actually was gonna mention that was the last thing I really wanted to talk about. The fact that the first time I watched it, I didn't even really catch on to any of the music in this film. And the first place that I caught it, where I actually like caught on to like the music, and I was like, oh, this is actually really good. It was the moment when we're in the train and Thornhill and Kendall are holding each other, and they're having that like conversation where like, oh, maybe we shouldn't get involved and everything. We shouldn't do anything like that. And there was some really nice light music in the background. I was like, oh, this is really great. And I feel like it's very much an underscore. Like it's definitely not even like in any way stepping on the toes of the acting or the dialogue. It's just like right there and you can barely hear it, but it's really nice. And I'm like, it really like adds to the scene, and I never noticed it before. And I was like, wow, this is really great music. And that's something that I picked up the second time around.
Yeah, I also believe that the same composer did Vertigo.
He did, yeah.
So like, we'll have to go to Vertigo at some point too,
Right.
to see this inspiration sorts of scenarios. But yeah, there are some just good pieces in the film that probably, like you said, just kind of go like maybe overshadowed just because of some of the action pace,
Sure,
that
yeah.
we see,
Yeah.
and maybe they're like underappreciated.
Yeah. Well, and there we have it. Alfred Hitchcock's American spy thriller, North by Northwest. We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The End Credits. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The End Credits Podcast, and over on Twitter at The End Credits. If you're watching the video version, make sure to subscribe to the End Credits YouTube channel. That's it. Thank you and goodbye.